Welcome to the Power of Design podcast. My name is Jack Osa. I'm an architect, born and raised in Colombia, South America. Years ago, I migrated to the United States to follow my dreams. And today, I'm the founder and principal of Osa Studio, a multidisciplinary architectural design firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. In this podcast, we talk about design, business, creativity, and the inspiration we need to create an exciting and powerful built environment. In this episode of the Power of Design podcast, I'm talking to Sharon Jordan. Sharon is the founder and CEO of Speech Tactics in Charlotte, North Carolina. Sharon is an entrepreneur, and she has a passion to helping kids improve their speech abilities. She is full of energy and has a great story of entrepreneurship. This is my conversation with Sharon. Sharon, welcome to the Power of Design podcast. How are you today?
I am doing very well, very well. Thank you for having me.
How was your day today?
My day was actually, I'm going to say busy, but it's always busy. It was very productive, I would say, very focused. So I was anticipating coming here to see you and talk with you, especially since our first meeting, we had such a great conversation initially. And I just look forward to coming in and chatting with you today.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. This is my episode number 71.
Woo!
Yeah, never thought I was going to make it that far, but now I'm really looking forward to do 100.
That's amazing.
I was thinking maybe by 100, do an event and invite all the 100 guests.
I will be there.
Do something really interesting. Nice.
I feel like I remember when we sat down and had a conversation, you told me about the podcast, and literally that day I went, and I don't know what number that podcast was, but I was like, oh, this is good. So to see you at 71, I think that's amazing. I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Sharon, tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up? Where do you come from?
Yes. Okay. Let's see. Dating back to Miami, Florida. I am originally from Florida, born and raised in Miami, Florida. Specifically, a little area in the city, what people now know as Wynwood. But when I grew up, it was really called Little Haiti. So it's an area that mainly a lot of Haitians and Hispanics lived. So that's where I was born and raised, born and bred. I come from a pretty large family. I have 4 siblings. Grew up in a very loving family, both parents, hardworking. So that's me in a nutshell.
Wow.
I hail from Miami, Florida.
Wow. And tell me about you growing up. How do you decide what to do for college? When you start realizing you started having like a direction in life?
Interesting question. I would say throughout childhood, but I want to say that kind of the guidance kind of started with the nurturing. My parents were very much so, not like you have to do this, but they always kept open just the opportunity and freedom for me and my siblings to do what it is we felt compelled, but to just put forth the effort to do our best in whatever that was.
Yeah.
And so whether it succeeded or it did not, there was always a soft landing space. So in that sense, I guess I always felt that, and if people say the sky's the limit is a mindset, but to truly like believe that, it sets you on a good track, a very positive track. So from there throughout grade school and high school and college, it felt very fluid, those transitions for me. A lot of hard work, but it felt effortless in a sense because I never felt like I was limited by anything internally or externally. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that you're treating your own children the same way, or what from that are you keeping on? What are you not keeping?
That's always the question, because I think that throughout your childhood and just when you become an adult, you learn to just take assessments in life. I think from our upbringing, we bring a lot of things that we're like, okay, that feels natural to us and innate to us. And then you want to then direct that in your child.
Yes.
But really, there's a natural process that your child
That's right.
has to go through.
Yes.
And so I'm constantly like checking myself with my daughter because her experience and growing and developing might not feel the same
Yeah.
as mine. I may be trying to replicate the feeling that I had, but she may interpret that differently. So I guess to answer your question, I'm just staying vigilant with her, with myself, and just ensuring that I'm trying to see her at every developmental milestone she is. And just always check myself too. And
Yeah.
I think that when we become parents, it becomes this thing of like how we should parent versus like how we should be as a person with
Right.
our children.
Yes.
So that's kind of an ongoing thing
Yeah,
for me.
I feel that couple of things. One, sometimes you want the best for them, so you really wanna tell them, oh, I already know that, I already went through that, this is how you avoid that. But it's impossible. They have to go through things.
Yeah.
And you can tell them, but it's not the same as experience. And sometimes it's frustrating because like, oh, I know I can avoid you this pain
Yes.
only
yes.
if you do this, but it's pretty much impossible. The other thing I think about is sometimes we parent out of our own weaknesses and vision of the world. These poor children, they have no idea. And we're just pouring all those things that sometimes I say,
Yeah.
why did I say that? That doesn't make sense. Like, that's not even healthy. Even coming from a good place,
Yes.
there are many things that we do that they had nothing to do with them, but had to do all about our own insecurities or problems, or we're projecting or reflecting
Yes.
what's going on.
And mainly it's coming from a place of fear, and wanting to protect your child. And I would say maybe a few months ago, maybe last year sometime, I was reading a book. I can't remember where it came from, but it stuck with me. And it was just talking about like the different types of parenting. And it was just like you can choose two ways of how you try and nurture your children. Carpenter parents, where you're just like, okay, this is, you're kind of chiseling and you're trying to shape this child into
Right.
this thing, right? And then it's the gardening parent that really provides what is needed. You may be planting the seed and you're providing the nourishment, but at different times, the child might need more sunlight than water.
That's right.
More water than sunlight. And I was like, ugh,
That's so good.
I need to pay attention to what my daughter needs at any given moment, because whatever I have, I want to be able to provide it.
Yes.
And if it's not enough, I want to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because we're both going to learn through that experience of that process. So that stuck with me because naturally, I think when you're at a certain point in life, and I only have one daughter, and I'm like, oh, okay, I just want to I see this vision for her or for us, whatever it is,
Yeah.
our family. And how do we make it happen? And that's just not, it just doesn't work that way at all. So
I know.
that was transformative for me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So tell me about your journey, and going to school, learning about your craft and all the way up to, getting to the point where, you're here in Charlotte making a lot of things happening.
Yeah. So prior to going into speech pathology, I started in psychology. I thought I wanted to move through psychology, become a psychologist, and eventually a psychiatrist. I've always been kind of intrigued with human behavior and just how we think and how our thoughts play into everything that we do. So I would say since high school, that's been something that I didn't realize I was so drawn to. But I went to the University of South Florida for both undergrad and graduate school, majoring in speech pathology. And how I got into speech pathology is that one of my advisors suggested that I meet someone who is actually a mentor now for me, and she was a speech pathologist. And I remember just going to visit her and watching her in clinic, and she had a client at that time that was aphasic. So this person had a stroke and they lost their ability to speak. And I was like, wow, this was a working professional. And I was blown away. And I wanted to know, how did that happen?
Wow.
Because speech and communication, it's so automatic for us that we don't really think about it until something happens. I think it wasn't a day later that I was a freshman and I changed my major to speech pathology. And then, the rest was history from there. I played basketball in undergrad. So that naturally, preoccupied my time in undergrad. So between speech pathology and basketball, I was pretty busy.
Oh, yeah.
And proceeded to get my graduate degree in speech pathology. You have to have your master's to practice as a licensed therapist. And so I ended up staying at USF and, transitioned from there. I ended up staying in Florida for a little bit in Tampa and met my now husband in Tampa. And he ended up relocating here a few years back for a banking position. And I came maybe 6 months after that, took a job at the hospital. And, I was still really working with adults at that time because that's where my curiosity and just my, what I did a lot of my training in was in head and neck laryngectomy and then working with stroke rehabilitation. I thought that that's where I would be for the rest of my days. So I ended up taking a position at Piedmont Medical Center in Rock Hill.
Okay.
Was able to start their laryngectomy program there, working with patients who had head and neck cancer, specifically laryngeal cancer, and their voice boxes. A voice box was removed due to cancer. And so I would be on a team to rehabilitate their voice by prosthesis. So putting a prosthetic device into the throat and then teaching them how to use it. I absolutely loved it because it was a very specialized skill that allowed me to help clients or patients in that particular realm. So from there, because it was such a small population that we worked with, I was asked to also support in the outpatient, which is primarily pediatrics.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I was like, okay, I always had a passion for kids, always. But that just confirmed it. I was like, okay, I'm having so much fun. I didn't say this is it because I never thought I would leave the hospital. But I was just like, something is really feels very natural and feels very like I can do it if I wasn't getting paid to do it.
Right.
Basically. And from there, one thing led to another. I was just picking up a couple of kids on the weekends to keep my feet wet in pediatrics. And before I knew it, I had a full caseload and working full time at the hospital. And my husband, who was my fiance at that time, was like, what is going on?
What are you doing?
You need to choose one. What is happening here?
Right.
Like, I never see you. You need to choose one. It was really hard for me to make the decision. But I think that certain paths or steps that you take in life really lead you to where you are supposed to be.
Yeah.
And, had I stayed in the hospital, I would just been kind of wobbling on that one stone for a long time. And I just knew that there was more down the path, And so I'm glad I made that step because it led me to where we are now with having speech tactics and being the founder and CEO of the pediatric therapy I think we're probably the only pediatric clinic that focuses on bilingual therapy services and specifically working with children with autism. We have about 22 full-time employees, And so there's a lot between
Oh, yeah.
then and now.
That is a lot.
But that's how I got into pediatric therapy. Like I said, I always had a passion for kids. I love kids. Anybody that knows me knows that my personality is free and outgoing in a sense. And that's what I love about kids.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me about the transition, when you made the decision to leave the hospital and say, okay, I need to take the step and start a business.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the platform for me to do all this work. How
Yeah.
did that work?
To be honest, Jack, I never really considered that I was starting a business. I started out just thinking that I'm just going to do speech therapy with kids.
Yeah.
And I just happened to be doing it for the county.
Yeah.
At that time, it was primarily early intervention. And so I was going into the home. So I didn't need a space. It was just me. When I realized that I actually had a business, I had hired about 6 or 7 therapists. So I was like, when I brought therapists on, it was kind of like, oh, they're working with me.
Yes.
They're working with me. I got somebody working with me. I need some help. Like, we got more kids that are being pushed my way. And so I need some help. So I was like, I'll hire this therapist and hire that therapist. And before I looked up, I had a whole team of therapists. And then I had to really transform my thinking.
Right.
And that process, I would say, was one that required a lot of self-assessing constantly. When did I want to stop treating? At what point was I forced to stop treating? That's when I realized I had a business, when I had to make those decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did that new challenge and new thinking, how did you receive that? Were you like open, okay, let's go to the new thinking and stop doing this, or?
I was resistant a little bit.
Yeah.
I was resistant. And I say that because I absolutely love doing what I did. I loved it. And I felt like if I stopped treating, I didn't know if I was like ready to take on what that entailed for the business.
Right.
So continuing to operate in my craft, I knew that it was a safe space for me.
Yeah.
To transition into something other was like, what will this require of me?
It's unknown.
It is unknown. But I would tell you, the moment I made the decision is when, if I can be honest, there was like a parent complaint.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, who's handling those issues right? We're all treating. Who's going to be? And then I realized that, I had to really take control over how the company was going to be represented. I started really thinking about culture. I started really thinking about what is it that I wanted people to think and say about speech tactics when they experienced it.
Yeah.
And over time, just those questions continued to evolve into more pointed questions about how do people experience this company, not just me, because it's not me.
Right.
I had to figure out a way to take, oh, that's my therapist. She's a great therapist. I wouldn't go to anyone else. To who says that about the organization when you have 6, 7, now 19, 20 therapists that represent one company, one vision, one mission.
Yep.
And hopefully under the same values.
Right.
That takes years. It sounds simple.
Yeah.
You can put your values on a wall, you can put them in your brochure, but that is the work.
That's right.
That is the work. And it's a It's a constant evolution. I think it's constantly growing. Anytime you add a new employee to, I always say the organization, having a business and, building a business and growing an organization are two separate things to me.
Right.
Building a business is, what are the analytics, the KPIs, and the strategic things we need to put in place to grow this business? Growing an organization is about people for me. And I had to learn the difference. So in growing a business, I had to, accept the idea that I am a CEO. I'm not a clinician anymore. Growing the organization, I had to really step into the responsibility of being a leader.
Right.
So that was transformative for me.
And when we talk about parenting, which is also impacting other human beings that you want the best for them, but now leading adults, you're still thinking about, okay, what's the best thing for them? How do I help them? And we also, make mistakes like we make parenting. And one of the things that I experience is, since I have a vision so clear in my mind, I don't feel the need to communicate it or repeat it too much. But I realize people need that because for us it's common, but we're just being, so centered that, okay, I got it. I told them, and so they should know. And now they need a lot of repetition to really communicate what's in your mind, because it depends when they receive that information, what happened, or in what context they can take it one way or the other. And the same as parenting, people really follow by when they see the example model, the behavior model. So you can have all your great intentions and values on the wall, but if you behave a different way, that's what people remember. That's what's going to have an impact. So that's something interesting that I see as well, because I do architecture and brand design, but it's still the same. I start doing the craft and I'm gonna doing it, but now the next level, I don't have to do that anymore, but it's new to me. So I'm kind of nervous because it's a different setting, it's unknown. So I'm kind of excited, but I'm also scared to do it. But I know that's for sure, that's where I want to go.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. When we talk about communicating vision to a team or to your team, I would say in the past couple of years is when I really started communicating the vision and just putting the energy behind it. I think that when we have the vision, it can be very relentless, right? Because it's very clear. And there are times where if I add something to that vision, I can't sleep at night. Like, it's like I'm up like, oh my, I need to get this, I need to get it on paper. Sometimes I would just get a piece of paper and I would just like scribble and draw things out. But I'll be honest, communicating that vision, you never know how people are going to receive it, especially your team. And when when you got 20, 25 people, consciously in your mind, like, I wonder, like, how's that person going to receive it? It's not just one person or two people. You're kind of wondering how they're going to receive the vision.
Sure.
But you're just kind of like, okay, I wonder what everyone thinks about that. But I had to let that go. Yeah. And I had to really operate and trust my leadership. Trust that I'm not going to be perfect. And I'm okay with dialing back some things. I'm okay with shifting when need to be. And I'm okay with communicating that to my team. And so I get to model how to be excited about something and not be convicted and fully committed to the point where you can't make the shift you need to make to fulfill the vision.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Power of Design podcast is brought to you by OSA Studio, a multidisciplinary design firm Focused on creating impactful experiences through the power of design, we partner with our clients to create buildings, interior spaces, brands, and strategies that help you deliver a successful project. As a minority-owned firm, we are committed to building a diverse platform of curious and driven design professionals so we can together pursue our full potential. For more information, please visit us at www.osastudio.com.
How do you keep yourself strong with good energy, good attitude day to day? Because doing these things are not easy. It's draining. It's emotionally hard.
Yeah.
We get tired. You know, you may have 22 people coming all to you for something. So in order to perform at that level, it's not easy. What do you do to keep yourself in shape?
I'm still learning that part. I'll be honest. I think that the more I'm stretched, the more I build a capacity for things. And I think I've been looking at that all wrong. I think that having the capacity to hold so much at one time doesn't really make you stronger, right?
Right.
It just makes you heavier.
Right.
If that makes sense. So I sometimes have felt that it's a necessity for me to like hold so much, just because again, even when I transitioned with so many therapists, it took some time for me to layer the organization. And now I'm learning to step back, be able to, I'll do something small like go to the library and work at the library for the day. I will try and make sure that if I schedule a day off, I take that day off.
Yeah.
I incorporate, listening to podcasts. And when things get really heavy, emotionally draining, mentally draining, a lot's happening at one time, I just allow myself to feel that, right?
That's huge.
Yeah, I allow myself to feel that. I try not to be like, oh, well, so much has happened, because I never want to project it on to my team. And if I do, they know, because they know my temperament. We know each other.
Yes.
So if I do, I always circle back and
Yeah.
I'll say, I'll be honest, yesterday was really tough. Here's why. And then I'm transparent with them, just about most things in the company, because we are a people serving company.
Sure.
I'm a servant leader. So I need, if there's anything that I'm hiding from my team, they're going to know, because I'm the type of person that's going to be all over my face.
Right.
It's hard for me to lie. It's just,
yeah.
It's just, you just got to see things. I'm going to start getting goosebumps and all sorts of stuff. So for me, the key is just recognizing it. And when I do that, I can kind of get over it quickly.
Yeah, that's huge. I just read a book called 90 Seconds to the Life You Love. So it's about emotions.
Yeah.
So, they talk about, there are like 85 emotions, but they're like basic 8 that are the ones we feel the most. So sometimes when we feel those negative emotions, we don't want to feel them, right? Yeah. So when they come, we want to quickly do something so we don't feel that, because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So the whole point about the theory is you really feel it for about 90 seconds. And you're talking about like, shame, sadness, embarrassment. And then after that is your brain recreating in your mind the situation. So it brings back the sensation.
Yeah.
So the other times, now it's your fault because you're the one bringing it back. And it gets to the point where, all the chemicals in our brain, then we become addicted to these chemicals, and our brain is just churning and churning, recreating anxiety so we can feel that again.
Yeah.
It was very interesting.
Yeah. I think that, I love that. And I'm going to check that book out, because And this happened a couple of days ago. I identified something in our billing system, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, that a missed authorization was thousands of dollars.
Yes.
Right. And so I immediately was just like, how did this happen? Like, how, I don't know if the insurance company is going to, reimburse us retroactively. Like, we've already done these services. And those things happen during transition. Things kind of like fall through the cracks. And when you identify them, it can be frustrating. It can be very frustrating. And I just remember being like, oh gosh,
Yes.
And I didn't want to like cheer myself out of it, like the cheerleader. You got this, I needed to sit in it because I was frustrated.
Right.
And it just wasn't that. I think it was a culmination of things, but leaving work at 8:00 that night and identifying that on my way out was just, what they call it, the straw that broke the camel's back. That was it for me. And I was just like, I just,
right.
I'm like,
yeah.
And I'm by myself, right?
Sure.
But I knew that I needed to allow myself to say, I'm frustrated.
Yes.
I'm upset.
Yes.
Like, how did this happen? And not place blame direct, because automatically you want to find who's responsible for this. Right. But once I got past that, I always go back to me. And I go back to me because I think about, where do we make improvements going forward? Yes. Every problem presents an opportunity, and sometimes they're costly. Every problem presents an opportunity to do something better, but sometimes in retrospect, it costs.
Yeah. And sometimes I realize that, let's say I make a mistake. Mm-hmm. And then when I realize, and then I start feeling bad, like, man, how did this happen? How did I make that mistake? And I realize that the value of allowing yourself to, feel bad about something, but then it's 90 seconds. Okay, got it. Mm-hmm. But then now I have the ability to say, okay, Jack, you're a human. Yeah. You have your best interest. You made a mistake. Mm-hmm. It's okay to make a mistake. Yeah. And give myself some grace and some self-compassion. Mm-hmm. That's one of the biggest things that I've learned this year, because I think before that, the drive to do things well, to provide high quality, when you make a mistake, you're like, you're sacrificing the quality. Yeah. And I realized that for many years, I was being too hard on myself. Mm-hmm. Just that easy. Like, if somebody else makes the mistake, I will say, hey, don't worry about it. We'll fix it. But if it's me, I will not treat myself like that. Yeah. And I've been realizing now that I see when I'm thinking about myself that way, I can stop it. Mm-hmm. And that's been huge, because it's not easy, because you're thinking in this pattern. It's like, I call it a train of thought, that is your mind used to think the same way over and over. Mm-hmm. And being able to stop that and say, okay, I understand you've been doing that for years, but now it's not helpful. You don't deserve it. We just keep going and switch. Where we're going, we don't need this. Yeah. It's like parenting yourself.
Yes. And it's just kind of, in college, I read this book by Eckhart Tolle. And I keep it on my nightstand, and it's called A New Earth.
Yes.
And one of the things in that book that, like, it just really transformed just how I was monitoring my thoughts, was just a simple phrase, and I'm paraphrasing it, but it was something about, like, be the watcher of your thoughts.
Yes.
And I just, like, in reading that, I got this vision of, like, me watching myself think, like, watching the thoughts. And so you can actually see, because you see if you're just recycling a thought, or you're just thinking over something obsessively over and over again. And when you're not conscious of that, it happens so automatic that you end up wasting so much time and energy on the same things that aren't fruitful for you. So, in that instance a couple of days ago, I could have sat there and just tried to think, well, how did this happen? And, okay, when did it happen? And where did it was done?
Yeah.
And when I told myself it was done, something happened chemically where emotionally I was able to feel it. I allowed it to pass. And then I was able to inject like reason and rational thinking to then create something better out of it. So, and that happens quite often. So I can't jump to the reasoning because I got to go through the emotional part.
Right.
I'm like, just let myself get through this because I am frustrated.
Yeah.
But okay, I said that, I felt it, it's done. What do we do?
Yes. And then the other part is how powerful language is.
Yeah.
Because now we're having a conversation with ourselves, and we might not be saying the word out loud, but we're saying it to ourselves. And one of the things, this was in another book I was reading, and they said about pay attention to the tone of voice you use when you talk to yourself. And I was like, wow.
Who's watching me?
Wow. Because it's not just
That's funny.
it's not just
Yeah.
what you said, it's the tone of voice that you're using.
Yeah.
And I realized, well, I never thought about that. But yeah, maybe I'm using a tone of voice that I don't deserve. I shouldn't be talking to myself like this. And once you change that conversation, then, the relationship with yourself starts changing because you start treating yourself differently.
Yeah. It's amazing how powerful that is. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's funny because I'm always thinking about your thoughts, but you're right. The tone is in your head is just as important as the tone,
right,
when you're speaking to others.
Yeah.
Cool.
Talk to me about a typical patient, let's say a kid with some kind of problem. How do you guys work with them? How do you guys take them to another place? How does that process work?
Yeah. So when our clients or kiddos is what we call them are usually referred to us from their pediatrician. So that's usually the first step. The pediatrician of the parent is identifying some delay or developmental disorder and their activities of daily living or their ability to communicate or speak. And so when they come to us, the initial step is the parent interview and the assessment. And that allows us to use a standardized assessment or developmental milestones to really see where that child is developmentally, how far off of the developmental milestone they are, and where do we start? And so from there, a treatment plan or therapy plan is developed that really targets specific areas of communication. Sometimes it is as specific as an articulation sound that's impacting how well people understand.
Yeah.
So, if a child is using the letter K for the letter, or using the letter T for the letter K, you imagine those are high frequency sounds.
Yeah.
And so a child may be unintelligible. So we work through that, and it's really research-based approaches that are implemented in therapy to move that child from an errored speech to producing a sound appropriately. So that's just one example. So for the most part, we establish where the child is baseline, and then we work with the parent as well as in therapy in one-to-one sessions or in group therapy to support whatever their needs are.
Wow, that sounds easy.
Yeah.
I would think that, there are a lot of things that you guys use, words or visuals or, activities. But what you're basically doing is using this external world to really impact the inside of their brain to touch or, affect specific areas that need more, manipulation or stimulation so they can do, these things.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many aspects to childhood development, right? I gave a very concrete one. Articulation is probably the most concrete thing. If they're producing a sound in error, we're working to remediate the sound. But even then, there's so many intricacies to a child's development that both speech and occupational therapists might work collectively with to support the child. Specifically, children diagnosed with autism may have sensory concerns where you are working to regulate their emotional or physical state so that they're in a space to be able to attend or participate in a task or be more aware of what their body is doing or how their body is moving in space. And a lot of things that we kind of take for granted, some of our kiddos are really working through um, building on those skills. So that's.
Yeah. I will think that with your, sensitivity and awareness of speech, do you realize or think about many adults you talk to and you're like, we could have fixed this years ago?
Sometimes if I know for sure it is a specific, like let's say if you if you see someone that has a really significant like lisp and their tongue is thrusting through their teeth and they're an adult,
Yeah.
then that's something very clear to me that I would be like, oh yeah, they probably didn't receive therapy, or something could have happened later on in life. It could be injury wise, that they could have had an accident. Like I do pay attention to those things, but I am not the therapist that kind of rushes to be like, oh. And I caution therapists, about doing that. We do have sensitivity to our ears hear sounds. Like
Right.
I can hear an accent and I can understand. It can be a really strong accent, but I can break down the sounds to make out what that person is saying.
Right.
But when it comes to, if I see someone, especially on TV, I'll be like, oh, okay, yeah. That could be this. It very well might be, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
Something else could have happened. But yeah, we have a pretty strong ear to different speech sounds. I would say for me, the biggest thing that my field has taught me is just the power of communication. Okay. When people hear speech language pathologists, and even as clinicians, I don't think we understand the power of communication. It's not just speech. It's not just pointing to pictures on a device. It is how people feel heard and how they feel they can express themselves independently and freely. So that's been a huge part of my journey, not just as a business owner, but as a clinician who is a business owner, just making sure that communication is at the forefront of everything.
Yes. And, that's a concept that we should learn about this early on, even when we're in middle school, high school, once kind of start getting an understanding of the world, somebody to teach you communication, because we just don't communicate.
Yeah.
We don't know, the fact that we're using some words with a meaning that we think is the meaning the other person has, that's not right. The other day I was reading about reflective listening. How do you really listen to somebody? And it was eye-opening for me, even though it's a very basic concept. Is, when somebody's talking to you, don't start creating the response and you're desperate to interrupt the person to say what you think. Really listen. And sometimes this sounds basic, but it works. The basic premise of reflective listening is tell the person back what you just heard, not your interpretation. What you just heard. You could even use the same words. Doesn't matter. But the goal is make the other person feel understood. But we're so desperate to prove that we understand, and now we had something to add. So let me show you what I have, my own agenda.
Yes.
Instead of like, let me help you. Yeah. Let me show you that I really understand you. And once they understand, now it's your turn.
Yeah.
Now you can do it. It's basic, but it's not easy. I try to practice it with my wife, and I'm not very successful. I think it was yesterday. We had some kind of situation where I said the wrong thing to my wife, and I said, okay, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Tell me what I need to say. And she said, say this, 1, 2, 3. And I said, okay, 1, 2, 3. And she was like, thank you. I'm like, yes, we made it.
We did it.
We did it. Yeah.
It's you're right, because it's one of those things where even if you're in a conversation that you're like enjoying, and and you kind of want to get in and you want to, and I find myself doing that at times too. Sometimes with my team, and or or people on my team, and we're in the conversation, or they're telling me something, and it's like in my head, I'm like, okay, yeah, oh, that's great, yeah, and I want to just like jump in and like, because I'm excited about the idea, and I have to remind myself that I can have a lot of energy when it comes to great ideas or just new ideas, and I may see it as like I'm excited, let's talk about it, but I try to make sure that I'm asking questions, and that asking questions is more empowering to the person than me like, oh yeah, and then we can do this, and then we can do that. I just love it, and then kind of take over the whole thing. And I'm very conscious of that. So I get that, because once things start going up there, you just like, when is it my turn? When is it my turn?
Yeah. What's the future of your practice? Tell me about your vision, and what's the best picture of the future that you want to create with your work?
Yeah. I definitely feel that not only just my company or speech tactics, but just pediatric therapy in a whole is really at a transition point. It has become, there is such a great need for services, and just not individualized services. Kids require a number of different things, and figuring out how we can offer that to bring more convenience, excellent service delivery, ease, and peace of mind for parents is, I think, where my focus is.
Yeah.
We know how to treat and provide therapy. I think the experience that's missing from pediatric therapy is, how do we serve the whole family, to offer convenience, to offer a little less stress when you have 3 kids and 2 of them, require the speech occupational therapy. One might be going to, another therapy, counseling. One might need, I don't know, soccer practice at the time that the other 2 are requiring therapy.
Yeah.
How do we take the modern parent now, I would say, working and, or navigating 2, 3 kids with a plethora of activities, because kids are very active now. My daughter is at birthday parties every weekend and track and all sorts of other stuff. And I'm like, how do we do this? But if in the pediatric therapy space, if we can create a space where there is a comprehensive, diversified service delivery model, that is where I see the future of speech tactics headed. And I don't think it has been thought of from the perspective of how do we serve the child, but from the perspective of how do we serve the family is really where my focus is.
That's great. Yeah. That's a great point, because that's the context of the life of that child, and that's the best approach. When you can impact their whole universe, which is their family.
And for kids, I mean, outside of therapy and extracurricular sports, the component that's really missing for our children who have individualized or specialized needs is that quality preschool education, or elementary school education for those kids who really need, still want to challenge them academically and challenge their learning abilities, while still incorporating a therapeutic approach to support that. So I have a really big vision as to where I would like to see our company go in the next few years, and meeting that need holistically.
How's technology impacting what you do?
Technology is really important. And it's interesting because, earlier on in my career, we're treating kids, client facing, as long as we had our EMR system, that was fine. But in growing an organization and building a business, I understand how critical technology is in terms of automating the experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's enough. It's not enough just to be like, hey, we're here, Stage Like this, and we're so happy to see your kid. That's one experience. The experience of the operational side is another. And that's where technology for me has come in, and I continue to look for opportunities to integrate technology to make that experience more efficient and more seamless for families, but also for our team as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think two things that are emerging that I've been hearing a lot about is one, video games therapy. So the video games are designed specifically to treat parts of the brain.
Yeah.
So basically, you have certain treatment. They design a video game for that because the brain is so engaged in a video game. There is a lot of intensity. So if it's geared toward a positive result that you want to help, that's a way to do it.
Yeah.
Because still it's stimulation. You're interacting. But you design the video game for the specific situation.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think the other one is gonna be just virtual reality, where you can deliver the session, but you're in different places. The person will be at home wearing goggles, but they see you and they can follow exactly what you wanted to do, but you're not physically together. But the brain experience is in 3D. You have the sounds. It's live. You are there. You're listening. I see it with my kids playing video games, where video games today is not like the way it was before, that you go and win and you're gonna start or something. No, it's all about social. They're always playing with other kids at the same time. Yeah. Always. So it's like a virtual society. I mean, they're there, they're talking every day. So they're having the same reaction and the same social dynamics that you get in person. It's just in a different plane.
Yeah. Honestly, I hadn't heard of, I know about the virtual reality with the goggles, but I had not heard of that in our therapy circle. Now,
it's coming.
You know what? Listen, I better get ahead of it then.
I know, because
I'm gonna start looking into that. But
I do when I'm doing projects that have interior work. We'll do it in 3D and VR, and I have the goggles, and I have my clients look at the space in 3D. So the technology is already here.
Wow.
It's just the application.
Using it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jack? I think, listen, I'm a big thinker. So now I'm going to go home and be like.
Think about that. I'm sure somebody's doing that already somewhere.
Yeah. I've been on several. I'm going to have to look into that.
Oh, yeah.
But I think
you can be a pioneer. The technology exists. It's just understanding
how to
how to do it, how to apply it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, Sharon, thank you so much for your time. I'm very
thank you.
Happy to have you here. I've known you for a while, and I was very impressed by what you do and who you are, and I'm excited about what you're going to do in the future.
I am excited as well. I thank you for having me. This is wonderful, and I appreciate your time. And this is great. Thank you so much, Jack. And best of luck. And I can't wait for you to reach that 100th episode.
I will. Thank you for listening to the Power of Design podcast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review if you like this content. And find us online at thepowerofdesignpodcast.com. I invite you to join my mission to become a better version of yourself through the power of design.